what I'm going to do, and hi everybody, I can't see you, and I'm thrilled you're here. I'm going to read some from the book, and then we're just going to open this up for Q&A both in the room and on Zoom. Okay, and hopefully you can hear me. The microphone's a little far away. Let me know if it's not loud enough. Okay. So the book is called Brainstorm: From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum. I was very intentional about that subtitle because I don't think people know most people don't know that there is indeed a bipolar spectrum. If I was gonna, poll the audience, how many of you had heard of the bipolar spectrum before this book? Not anybody in the room. They're all shaking their heads no. And that's a really important distinction. So that's the title. And then I don't usually read the dedication, but I want to today because it's for my grandfather, Lewis Wall, and my mother, Harriet Wall Schley, who wrestled with their own brainstorms. Your lives are a blessing. The healing here is in your name. Today would have been my mother's 97th birthday. And so Amy and I were looking for a date. We thought, with intention, I chose her birthday because she did suffer from bipolar, undiagnosed. And towards the end of her life, she had read an early manuscript and she said, go for it. So she gave me her blessing to tell us what. Okay, everybody? Thank you. So here I go. So this is, again, I hope the sound is good. From the prologue. Take a little sip of water first. So here. I got myself here, team here. Okay. We're hurtling down I-95 South, heading to Naples, Florida, to visit my brother Bill and sister-in-law Annie for winter break. It's the third day of the drive, and the four of us, Joe, me, and our twins, Sam and Maya, have settled into a rhythm, switching drivers every couple of hours. The kids are now hanging out with earbuds and laptops, Maya in the backseat, Sam next to me. The driver gets to pick the podcast. Sam and Maya are almost 17. They've had their licenses for just shy of 6 months, with most of their driving careers spent on backcountry roads. The white knuckle shift each of them just had, driving 70 in pouring rain on a 2-lane highway in South Carolina, surrounded by 18-wheelers, was an initiation into a new level of driving prowess. They're feeling primed for action. Our Honda Pilot tank is full, and I'm tanked up on 2 Dunkin' Mocha lattes. This is a 24-hour trek. Caffeine powered, I'm determined to deliver us to our destination for the night, Gainesville, Florida, 5 hours away. I'm happy to have the teens captive in the car for a few days. Their lives are so full now with commitments to an academically driven high school, sports, friends, clubs, plus their new licenses. Not to mention Instagram, Snapchat, and whatever other new social media craze of the hour has emerged, filling their every waking moment. The spaciousness of this time together without an agenda feels luxurious. And though I'm hoping for some meaningful conversation, I know better than to force it. Just outside of Georgia, the subject comes up. Maybe it was because of the rhythm of windshield wipers that had us mesmerized, or because the kids were wired yet spent from their share of the drive, or because they'd simply run out of chats to snap for the moment. Sam was sitting next to me and riding shotgun instead of in the backseat on Buzz. Maybe that helped. Guys, do you remember I told you I wrote a memoir on my experience with bipolar called Brainstorm? Yes, they said in unison. And without that absent-minded hesitation I've learned means they're pretending to listen. A rare present moment of full attention times 2. There's something I'd like your opinion on, and it begins with a bit of a story. Okay, Mom, phone down, Sam says with a grin. You know how I go on my women's whitewater Deerfield River paddle every summer in August? Nope. Well, there's a friend of mine who always comes. The paddle is exhilarating, leaving us a bit high in the best way, and we celebrate with my once-a-year beer and burger at the People's Pine. We were checking in over homebrew, and I asked my friend, who's usually constitutionally upbeat, how her summer was. She said it hadn't been great. Then she told me something that made my heart stop. Her sister's son had taken his own life in May after being very depressed. He had been diagnosed with bipolar years ago. I'm not sure why, Because usually I hesitate to be out about my brain, but without missing a beat, I responded, I'm also bipolar 2. She was surprised. Most people who know me as energetic and positive are. She asked when it first happened, how long I'd known my diagnosis, and so forth. I couldn't see the kids' reactions because it was dark and rainy, but I sensed they were paying attention. I told my friend how sorry I was, I continued. It's such a cruel disease. Then I told her about my memoir and that I'd given it to some friends to read. She said something that kind of blew me away. Sarah, did you know that my business for decades was a private publishing service specializing in memoirs? I'd love to see your manuscript. I told her I hadn't read it in a long time, that I wrote much of it a decade ago. I even said, I think it kind of sucks. She said, I'll be the judge of that. Send it and I'll take a look. I sent her a short version and she called me the next day. She said if she had read my manuscript 6 months ago, her nephew might still be alive. That my memoir would save lives and she would edit it for free in honor of her nephew. Wow, what an offer. I continued with the kids. I had told myself I couldn't publish the book until Grandma and Grandpa were gone because there's a lot of grandma stored here. Now they are. I also told myself I wouldn't publish it until you guys were old enough to understand and give me your consent. And now you are. I stopped talking for a moment, my breath stuck in my throat. Maya and Sam were uncharacteristically silent, listening to every word. I want to know what you guys think. I'm in a dilemma about whether to do this. On the one hand, you have my friend's super generous offer. You have the fact that the way has been cleared with Grandma and Grandpa passed on. You have the knowledge that the manuscript really could help people, maybe a lot of people, maybe save lives. And you have the opportunity in me as an author to destigmatize the disease. Yes, bipolar can look like this. A woman who is blessed with a full life, professional, mother, wife, etc. On the other hand, you have the stigma. I don't want you guys to be embarrassed by me. I may be putting my career in jeopardy. So many people still have deep prejudice against mental illness, and they blame the victim. They fear and mistrust people with the bipolar label. Coming out of the closet with the truth of my history could put me on the receiving end of that kind of ism. It could tarnish my professional reputation, cost me clients, livelihood, your college tuition. I keep going back and forth on what I should do, publish or not. What do you guys think? Zero hesitation. You have to do it, Mom, Maya said. Absolutely no question, Sam echoed simultaneously. Mom, you really could save lives. What else is more important? Who cares what other people think? Tell the truth. You know, it's kind of like sexual orientation, Sam continued. Your generation cares about it, we could care less. Yeah, attitudes are changing about mental health, Maya said. A lot of kids we know are on meds. A lot of kids have anxiety. Kids cut themselves. Kids admit they're suicidal. We learn about this stuff in health class and we all just kind of accept it. Don't worry, Mom, people won't judge you. Mom, you have to do this. My heart swelled with gratitude for the goodness of these kids and for this moment in time when I could finally be fully open with them. I felt relieved at no longer having to hide the story, the whole story of my truth, the story of my whole truth from them. They knew part of the story, but they didn't know the full story. I had been protecting them. I had never wanted them to know what I had gone through or to be afraid for their own brains. I felt so much pride in the moment, driving through Georgia with the car's headlights piercing the dark. Pride at their generosity of spirit and their commitment to doing the right thing. It was almost enough that moment right there. They're championing me and this cause. But then I realized that to fulfill their aspiration for me, to merit this level of enthusiasm and respect, I would have to say yes to this project. Yes to laying my soul bare and telling the raw truth and sharing a story full of sorrow and redemption. And so I am, and so I have. Yeah. So that's cool. Okay, here's the introduction. For 25 years, I wrestled with a demon, a merciless perpetrator of terror who would emerge from the shadows and abduct me to his realm. I could not anticipate his timing or comprehend his motives or why he chose me as victim. I could not understand what I'd done to provoke his wrath. Like Persephone in the underworld, I was caught in the grip of a force I could not overcome. for months on end, a prisoner of darkness. I don't literally believe in demons or hell, but this is what it felt like on the inside. The brutality I was experiencing is commonly referred to as depression, but that word does not begin to explain the cruelty of the disease that would bring me to my knees begging for mercy. I went to the precipice of death, believing only there would I finally find relief for my broken brain. I finally learned that the brain pattern I carry is a genetic anomaly on the bipolar spectrum known as bipolar 2. The Roman numeral 2 is the critical distinction in understanding, diagnosing, and treating it. And it can be treated effectively. There is hope. There is relief. My demons have finally been confined to the underworld where they belong. Their captive has been freed. The tragedy is that millions of people with bipolar 2 and on the bipolar spectrum go untreated, and their lives are destroyed. For many reasons that I describe in this book, bipolar 2 and other bipolar spectrum disorders are usually missed in diagnosis. People suffering from bipolar 2 are among the homeless, the addicts, the alcoholics, those tormented in the psych wards, those electric shocked. Their families are ruined, their loved ones brokenhearted. I would have been there too. Had it not been for a combination of luck, love, dedicated healers, and effective medicines to treat the chemical imbalance in my brain. My life was saved. I offer this book with a prayer that it may give you the hope, knowledge, and power to save your own precious life or the life of someone you love dearly.
Deep breath.
Breathing. Everybody breathing. The next section I'm going to read, and then we'll open it up for comments and conversation. It's called The Brutality of the Day-to-Day. And I was very intentional about writing this piece because part of my mission in this book was so that people have a brain like mine, people experience this kind of brain challenge, would know that they're not alone and would know that there was help. Because when I was going through this, I couldn't find a book like this. I found one finally, but it was about a different kind of syndrome. And so I wanted people to understand and know that there was someone who understands what it's like inside their brain. So I try to make it graphic. This one's called Brutality of the Day-to-Day. It's a late winter day with snow still fresh from a blizzard. The sun has emerged brilliant, reflecting off the white expanse. None of this moves me. Leah and Larry, my hardy neighbors, have invited me to go cross-country skiing in the state forest across from our home. A year ago, I would have leapt at this invitation. Now I drag myself out of bed, struggling to remember where I put skis, boots, poles. What can I wear on an icy March day to stay alive? Despite 27 winters as a skier and even ski instructor, I can't remember my layering system or where any of my clothes are. I barely have the physical energy to get to the car, let alone get out and propel my body against the will of gravity up any of the notoriously steep hills nearby. I don't revel as I usually do in the speed of the descent. I'm just glad to be down the hill, not having broken or bloodied anything. I return home emotionally and physically spent. My body feels as if it lives on Jupiter, where gravity is much more intense. An hour's activity leaves me exhausted. No endorphins. All I want to do is sleep. I've been an avid sportswoman my whole life. If it's winter, it's skiing, sledding, skating. If summer, swimming, biking, blading. Joe likens me to the line from one of the Winnie the Pooh books. Christopher Robin didn't care what it was doing outside as long as he was out in it. I've always reveled in the feel of my body and nature and the gift of renewed spirit. But now I feel geriatric. My muscles fatigued, bones aching, breath short. I also feel strangely disembodied, as if my brain doesn't compute messages from nerve endings and muscle sinews. I don't know why typical runner's high disappears. Perhaps endorphins are not manufactured or not released, or somehow neutralized during the down cycle of bipolar 2. It's anybody's guess. The vast complexity of the brain is still uncharted. Whatever the cause, the result is that I get no relief or joy from physical exertion. I miss this greatly. Simple everyday conceptual tasks I've taken for granted are nearly impossible. One day, it takes me 3 full hours to unpack 2 bags of groceries. No kidding. I can't figure out where anything goes. I can't concentrate, can't remember what I'm in the middle of doing, from shelving the cereal boxes to putting away the tomatoes. In constant confusion, I'm unable to sequence actions or do simple addition or subtraction. I can't add more than a few numbers in a sequence. I forget multiplication. This makes me miserable. I used to have 800s in math. This disease is humbling. I can't write a paragraph. It's nearly impossible to recall words like humbling. This inability makes me miserable too. I think of myself as a decent writer. I can't write. Even though I graduated with an MBA from UMass, I can't recall the term for a particular economic concept. This drives me crazy. What is it? I can picture it, but not the words for it. I hate not being able to find words for concepts I have used for years. Shopping malls and supermarkets are impossible. There are just too many choices. The inability to make decisions leaves me overwhelmed with anxiety and shame. How long can I stand in an aisle trying to choose between peanut butters, the large or the small, the organic or the not organic, the local or the from far away, the cheap or the high priced? These decisions paralyze me. Getting dressed in the morning poses a similar challenge. Deciding what to wear makes my heart pound with anxiety. What goes with what? How do I choose colors? If it's cold enough to need socks and there aren't any, I simply can't go out. I stopped doing laundry. It's too overwhelming to go through the sequencing it takes to fold, sort, and put away clothes. In the office, in the bedroom, in the kitchen, things pile up. It's too hard to remember where I put them and easier to have them in plain sight. But I hate this mess. The chaos makes me crazy, and I'm embarrassed to invite anyone over into the scene, even though I'm desperate for company and terrified to be alone with my brain. I also can't do dishes. It's not that I don't want to do dishes. I really can't do them. I look at a pile in a sink, counters with crumbs and spilled ingredients, and I am just overwhelmed. My brain doesn't know where to start, how to sequence the task, how to keep going. I stare a lot. I fear the kids will get lost in the life-sucking vortex of our home, so we drive the 40 miles round trip from our rural abode to spend the day with loving, tolerant friends in town. These trips away from the hearth drive my husband crazy. He needs unstructured time at home to recharge and feels exhausted by my demand to keep moving. But home is a dark, oxygen-starved cave for me, and I have to breathe. I'm sure I'm not giving my kids the activities they need to thrive and compare myself ruthlessly to their friends' mothers who provide gymnastics and piano and art classes. The thought of soccer overwhelms me. How would I find a team? Who do I call to sign them up? Where do I get uniforms and cleats and water bottles? And if I do buy these things, how do I keep them in a place where I can remember them for the next practice? I won't want to wash the shirts and socks because I'm afraid I won't be able to find them for the next game. Then I'll be filled with shame that my kids look dirtier than other kids. To get there, I'll have to buckle them in, bring snacks, gas up the car, and find the field in time for practice. I know I can't do any of this. Somehow I try anyway. The effort exhausts me. When we're back in our garage, I leave all the gear in the car, go inside and collapse on the couch. Someone else will have to unbuckle the kids and make supper. I'm done. When a doctor or therapist or friend calls to offer support, I answer the phone from the couch. I scribble a note to attempt to remember what I've agreed to. But by the time I get to my calendar downstairs, I have no idea where I put that piece of paper. And I have no idea what I've committed to. I used to keep my calendar on Microsoft Outlook, but my computer's down and I don't have the energy or focus to fix it. I'm back to a paper calendar, which is never by the phone. And as a result, I miss commitments, I'm chronically late, or I forget a friend is coming over and I'm out shopping when they arrive. I've always prided myself on reliability and punctuality, and this flaky behavior drives me crazy. I also judge myself mercilessly for it, as I am sure others do, and who could blame them? Money drains through us, adding more stress to our lives. Because I am so dependent, my husband can't work as much. He's doing everything he can to keep me alive, attend to the kids, run our household. I'm nearly incapable of taking care of myself or my kids, so we hire childcare, cleaning help, and more. There's no way I can work at my high-powered, intellectually demanding job. Moreover, I'm frantically seeking solutions of all kinds, and these so-called remedies, supplements, and therapists are exorbitantly expensive. Nothing works. I try every guru of every hoping to help friend, homeopaths, acupuncturists, chiropractors, Chinese medicine purveyors, naturopathic doctors, each with their own theory of healing and corollary slew of supplements. Ring up a charge of $350 or so for each of these visits. I spend thousands of dollars on credit and our credit card debt source. When you have this disease, you are desperate for help and thus vulnerable to charlatans and would-be healers who don't have a clue about what they're dealing with. A man named Paul Sterling, I have changed his name, referred to me by a reputable colleague, claims to have the power to do distance healing. He calls me from 3,000 miles away in Oregon. After a quick long distance scan, he finds that walking demons have colonized my body. He performs an exorcism over the phone for $300. Really? Nothing changes. A chiropractor recommended for his unique and effective alternative healing approaches uses homemade tinctures that work on my energy body. He determines which ones I need by placing crystals on my chakras. The cost? $150 for an hour. Then there's a dear friend psychic who, for $250 an hour, tells me in a finger pointing tone that DNA can be overcome, family history is irrelevant, and all I need to do is get off sugar, meditate on my third eye, open my crown chakra, and then I'll be cured. Spoken with the arrogance and ignorance of someone who has zero experience with my disease. As the days darkened in the fall of 2006, I began to panic. I've been sensitive to seasonal changes for years, always preferring the long, warm days of summer. If I feel this bad when it is warm and sunny, the dark and cold will kill me. Maya's mysterious breathing challenge is also much worse in the winter. The year before, she'd suffered 5 pneumonias in as many months. Winter colds and flus seem to be a trigger. I reason that if we take her someplace warm, perhaps her lungs will have the chance to strengthen and heal. Maya's situation, coupled with mine, convinced us to head south to Florida, where my parents are. They offered to rent us a place in their neighborhood, delighted to be near their youngest grandchildren. But the Florida sunshine does nothing to ease my pain. Instead, I feel rootless and isolated from my support system of friends at home. My anxiety intensifies. Hope everybody's doing all right out there. One morning, I'm in the kids' bathroom trying to find their toothbrushes and towels. Sam approaches asking, "Mama, can you open the jar of peanut butter for me? I'm hungry." As he hands it to me, the jar drops onto the cold tile floor. It shatters, leaving the peanut butter lace shards all over the floor. It's a simple mistake any 4-year-old could easily make, but I let out a blood-curdling scream and then scream again and again. Not because I'm mad at Sam, I know it's not his fault, but the effort it will take me to secure another jar of peanut butter is too much to bear. I'll have to find my wallet, my keys, get in the car, buckle both kids in, remember where the store is, get there, find a parking place, get the kids out of their car seats, walk with them through a sea of cars in the strip mall, remember what I need at the store, feel the dread of people staring at me and the endless shelves and choices of peanut butter, and then the whole thing in reverse. It will take way more mental energy than I have. Sam's tanned, innocent face turns pale as tears stream down his cheeks. He wails in fear. What's going on with his mama? I see the terror in his eyes and stop myself. Sammy, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm so sorry, I'm yelling. Confused but relieved, he lets me hold him. Meanwhile, my inner accuser is having a field day in his righteous, patronizing tone. You're pathetic. You don't deserve to mother this beautiful, innocent child. I concur. My inner accuser is right. Our friends Stan and Dahlia are coming to Florida in January with their daughter, who's the same age as our kids. Joe's back in Massachusetts working. They invite me and the kids to go camping with them on a pristine beach, one of the few left in Florida, where you can still camp by the sea in rustic cabins. Stan and Dahlia are expansive hosts and gourmet cooks who live in huge gulps and are unfailingly generous in sharing their abundance. Where I bring ramen noodles and trail mix on a camping trip, Stan literally roast duck over an open fire, bakes potatoes snugged into the coals, and then serves these with margaritas and a fresh lime and a linen napkin draped over his wrist. But Stan and Dahlia don't know about my illness, and they aren't people I feel comfortable sharing the details with yet. Dahlia knew I'd been struggling with something, so I do tell her it would be tough for me to organize packing for a camping trip. Don't worry, she tells me over the phone, we'll do it all. We've already got the cabin reserved, we've got coolers and ice and tons of food. You know Stan loves to cook. He won't let you help anyway. I'll bring sleeping bags for the kids, just bring your toothbrushes, it'll be fine. Okay, I say, knowing that this adventure with two healthy, boisterous adults will be excruciating for me. But the kids will love camping with a friend, and I want to do this for them. Because of his joie de vivre and sunny nature, I imagine Stan has never known anything close to what is going on inside my brain. He phones me in the morning we were leaving with a simple request. We got everything, but I forgot a bottle opener. Could you pick one up and a 6-pack of beer on your way up here? I feel my throat clench and panic come over me. I can't explain to Stan why this simple request is putting me over the edge. That if I have to stop for a bottle opener and beer, I don't think I can come. Packing overnight gear and clothes for the kids, navigating to a new place on my own and keeping them from meltdowns is already daunting. I don't want to sound selfish, but I have no choice but to tell a small part of the truth. I'm not sure I can, Stan. I'll have the kids in the car seats and I don't want to stop. Flooded with shame and embarrassment, I know Stan must think I'm bizarre, uptight, and ungrateful. They're doing everything. Can't I just get some beer? Don't worry, I'll ask Mary to get it, Stan says. She's coming today too. I survived the weekend thanks to Stan and Dahlia's generosity, but the entire time, instead of enjoying myself, I'm anxious to leave. Keeping a facade of levity sucks me dry. Driving the 3 hours south on Florida's Highway 41, I am bone exhausted, dehydrated, and shaking. Thankfully, Joe's home on our arrival. I pass off the kids to him, drag myself to my room, close the curtains, slam the door. I am exhausted by human contact, yet too scared to be alone. In February, one of my closest friends, Lisa, comes to Florida to visit with her daughter, Susan, who has been friends with the kids since they were little. Lisa knows I'm in crisis. Not long after she arrives, I tell her about my dilemma of the moment. I have a new set of prescriptions from a psychiatrist who practices integrative psychopharmacology. That is, he's prescribed allopathic meds as well as all kinds of herbal, nutritional, and homeopathic supplements. But I've had to travel 15 feet from the room where I've been speaking with him and taken some cryptic notes to the kitchen, where I keep the numerous supplements he's recommended. During those 15 feet, I've lost focus. And by the time I reach the refrigerator to locate the supplements, I've forgotten what he's recommended, and I can't follow my own notes on what to do. Lisa recommends that I make a chart to track times, dates, and dosages of the various meds. This proves overwhelming. I can't order my thoughts enough to focus on that task. But since my friend has come all this way and is here to support me, I want to try for her. I struggle to remember what I'm doing, yet I draw a blank. My expression must reflect this as I see the sad, compassionate wince on the face of my friend who knows me to be, in her words, brilliant. Wow, Sarah, she says, catching her breath. I didn't know it was this bad. It is. Stripped bare, vulnerable, in the depths of my dysfunction, I feel embarrassed and relieved at the same time to be seen in the raw, in my inability to process simple information. That maybe having seen the real me, Lisa can help figure out what to do. That afternoon, she comments on my bloody fingers. When my illness flares up, so does a corollary compulsion. I pick at the cuticles of my fingers until they bleed. And no matter what I do, I can't stop. I cover them with Band-Aids, then pick the Band-Aids off. I put gloves on at night and resume the addiction in the morning. My kids see the bleeding and say, "Stop, Mom, your fingers are all bloody." I'm painfully aware of the example of self-mutilation that this models for them. And still I can't stop. My fingers burn with pain. Clothes, sheets, and towels get bloody. Strangers look at my hands with conspicuous horror. My husband buys me white silk gloves. They get bloody and I lose one. It's horrible, embarrassing, excruciating, but I can't stop. Another friend, Laura, Googles the paper and finds this: excoriation disorder, also referred to as chronic skin picking. This is a mental illness related to OCD and is directly linked to chemical imbalances in the brain, the site explains. It's not your fault, Laura tells me, and her kind words lift some of the shame. She prints out the result of her internet search. The text recommends a particular form of vitamin B. I try it in large doses. It doesn't help. My fingers are outrageously painful, and I'm humiliated by my powerlessness over this compulsion. My life is unraveling, my brain not working. I can barely care for myself, let alone the twins. I don't think it can get much worse. I am wrong. I'm gonna stop there, and I just want to show the audience my hands. Every day that these hands are just beautiful, I don't love them. So I'm gonna stop there. I
had a slight audio issue, but I think people haven't, but I think we fixed it, so we got most of it.
Okay, let's hope.
And Michael Gold says 1,600 total, if I remember.
Oh, wow.
What does that mean?
I think he says, this is a friend of mine from kindergarten. He's referring to the SAT scores.
Right. Sarah, it's just because you said you had 800 in math and you left out the English.
When I first did my first reading, and I felt uncomfortable stopping there because it's such a dark moment, but a friend of mine said, just stop. Like, let's just take a breath there. We don't have to fix it yet. So I took her advice for this as well, because you can see I'm alive and well. Most of you know I've been for a while. Yeah, I just love to open up for questions or comments.
People raise their virtual hand. I think we can unmute them, actually.
Yeah, if they raise their virtual hand, we can also see if there's any questions in the room too. And
I just wanted to start with one thing, which you mentioned the date, 2006, fall 2006, it seemed like a lot of things were unraveling for you. Some of what you just described happened. And yet, when we first started talking, you mentioned that we've met in 2004.
Yeah.
So obviously this has been going on for a while prior to that. And I'm curious how you were able to function, you know, professional. I met you when you were on stage at a conference, actually running the whole conference, fully functional, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, every brain's different, right? So when I talk, I have to talk about my brain, and we can make some generalizations, but not all. But in my case, when I'm not sick, I'm completely well. Like when I'm not having a bipolar 2 breakdown, then I'm the Sarah, you know. I don't have symptoms when it's not flaring. So I can be completely, you know, competent and capable, and, you know, everything the way that most people know me when they think of Sarah Schley is all those periods in the interim when I wasn't having an issue. And I didn't have, my first breakdown was at age 21 when I was a senior at Brown University. And for the TED Talk I'm about to give, you know, I talk about that. I seemed like this kid who had it all. You know, I was Ivy Leaguer, I had a 4.0, I was heading medical school, I played varsity sports, beautiful friends, some of them probably in the Zoom room. And then all of a sudden it was like a flip switch in my brain. And all the terror that I read about there began. But it wasn't nonstop in the case of my brain for whatever reason, more than fine.
But it was unpredictable when it would kick in, right?
Yeah, yes, correct. And there was a period in the beginning, like I think bipolar spectrum disorders, I've learned early onset, first onset tends to be under age 25. And my 20s were really rocky until things kind of even out. So I had a 6 months on, 6 months off, 6 months on, 6 months off in my 20s. And then after that, there were like longer periods. Everybody's different, but I didn't get the right diagnosis for 25 years. That's in the TED Talk.
And I just want to say, I'm so glad you left off in the book when you just said things were about to get worse, because as I was saying to our colleagues over dinner, this book is a real page turner, and it's the way you leave off at the end of every chapter, like you just have to keep going. And I learned so much about you, and I just want to thank you for being so raw and honest and open. And I'm thinking back to when this was actually happening for you, and how you had to fight so hard to camouflage because you weren't able to be open at that time, and how hard that must have been for you and for your family, for Joe, for the kids. And I actually can't even imagine how you could have camouflaged this for so many years.
Yeah.
From people who didn't know you that well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like people, I think I don't physically look different unless you looked at my hands, right? So I think people, like, you know, you could sort of plaster a fake smile on, and if I wasn't talking, you know, people might not necessarily know, you know. Sometimes I look at photos of myself during periods that I know I was depressed. I was like, wow, she looks normal, you know. But if you dug a little bit, you find out, you know. And I think, yeah, I mean, I was terrified of the stigma. And this is a big reason I say after 40 years, my first breakdown happened when I was 21 years old, do the math. I just turned 61. It took me 40 years to feel safe to come out fully with a story. Some people knew, you know, my close friends knew, obviously my family knew. I told my colleagues last, all you guys, the last people that I told. Why? Because I was afraid for my career, you know, and I still, and even to like right up to 6 months ago, I for the book, I did a GoFundMe campaign to raise the money to publish it. And right up to the moment I was going to press send on that campaign was when everybody I knew I was shaking. You know, it still felt scary.
And yet the response has been amazing, tremendous.
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah. The response has been like so healing. I call it like a shame eraser because, you know, I think for anybody that don't know, you know, LGBTQIA plus BIPOC, whatever, you know, isms any of us may be experiencing in this country or on this planet, I think we don't know how much energy is being used in repressing that, keeping that down and protecting, trying to protect ourselves. When I finally came out with this story, I feel like I like lost 30 pounds. You know, I just feel like so much lighter. And also there was, I was in tears a lot from people, a little bit less now because now I'm more used to it, but in the beginning, I had so many beautiful responses of people saying, thank you so much for telling your story. You know, my sister, my mother, my cousin, myself, my nephew, you know, thank you for your courage. Thank you for normalizing, thank you for destigmatizing. And my goal with the book and with, you know, being here with you tonight, besides I'm so thrilled to see your bookstore and our friends, was the three things. And the stigma, here I am, nice middle-aged lady. This is the face of bipolar. Save lives to help by articulating and helping people understand what the bipolar spectrum is and trying to do better around diagnostics. We can talk more about that. And then maximize healing because there's a lot of healing. There's a lot of preventive stuff you can do when you have any kind of a diverse brain, which is all of us.
So the use of the word spectrum, can you just describe what that means? Where are you on the spectrum? And
Yeah, totally. So, you know, again, how many people out there have ever heard of bipolar spectrum and no hands go up, right? And I didn't know there was such a thing, right? So what it is that if I did a poll of the people in the audience here, and I said, when you hear the word bipolar, what do you think of? Quick, showing up. When you hear the word bipolar, what do you think?
Highs, lows.
Exactly. When you hear the word bipolar, and she was not audience planned, she didn't know I was going to ask her. When you hear the word bipolar, most people say way high, way low. You know, so the high is, you know, shopping sprees and sex sprees and irresponsible behavior, and then the low is darkness, right? Well, it turns out with people on the bipolar spectrum, what Shona is describing is one end of the spectrum, and that's classic bipolar 1, also known as manic depression. It's easy to diagnose. Why? Because you see the mania. As you go down the bipolar spectrum, there's still, you're still forms of bipolarity, and I'll describe that more in a minute. But in my case, no major high. There's no mania. So because people like me, when we will present to a doctor as depressed, because we'll show up in the dark phase, in the depressed phase, and we look lethargic and, you know, low self-esteem and inner accuser and all those other things, the doctor will say, oh, she's depressed. That's obvious. Let's give her a depression medication. But it turns out I'm actually bipolar. I'm actually on the bipolar spectrum. All right. So why is that a problem? What's the problem if he gives me depression medication? Anybody want to venture a guess?
It's not treating your problem.
It's not treating the problem, but not only that, the typical depression, unipolar depression medication like Prozac can actually be like poison for a bipolar brain like mine. And I've learned from my doctor bipolar friends, I can't say it always is poison. For some people, you know, it's a spectrum, right? In my case, it was like poison. So it begins by seeming like it works, and then it makes you sicker and sicker and sicker. And then when you go back to your doctor sicker, oh, she's more depressed, let's give her more of that drug. Anybody who knows systems thinking would say that's a vicious cycle, right? So I'm going to end up much worse off. And so I'll give you an example. Like one of the drugs they gave me, literally, it made me feel like my brain was shaking inside of my skull. It was hitting my skull. And typical antidepressant medication. So I don't want to say that all antidepressants are bad, because if you're at the other end of the spectrum, if you're unipolar, it's going to be really helpful, you know, maybe save your life. But with the misdiagnosis and all of the kind of, you know, nuance and shades of gray and rainbow in between, those psychiatric medications can be very dangerous. And I keep going. I'm doing this TED Talk May 7th, so I just did all this research. So it's all on the top of my head. So stop me when you want. But the other thing that I've learned is that suicide attempts are way up since the pandemic, right? So it turns out that people with any kind of bipolar are twice as likely to attempt suicide as people with clinical depression. All right, so that means 2 to 1. So anybody with bipolar is twice as likely to try to commit suicide as anybody with depression. That means if I'm misdiagnosed as depressed, my life's at risk, right? Does that make sense? So there's a lot to getting the diagnosis right. And it's not that hard if you know what you're looking for.
Okay, so another cliffhanger. You want to? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hello, Rebecca.
Well, I have a million
How are
questions.
you, my
actually.
friend?
Good.
It's Rebecca.
Thank you so much. It was amazing listening to you read. But you did mention addiction and the sort of propensity, perhaps, of people with bipolar to self-medicate through addiction. Is that what you were referencing?
I think I haven't done enough of the research on this. So this is just my belief, right?
Okay.
And well, here's one anecdotal piece. Dear friend of mine, beautiful young woman, married to a beautiful young man, a vet, PTSD, overdosed from opioids, and he's gone to the next world, having left 2 young boys. She's a psych nurse, and she said, I know he was undiagnosed bipolar. So that's just litmus test of one or subject of one. But I think that a lot of people who have bipolar and other psychiatric diseases are self-medicating, right? And so a lot of people, I believe that a lot of people on the streets, people with addiction, people in jail for sure, are dealing with mental illness or some form of brain diversity. Now they're calling it neurodiversity, which I like, or neuroatypical.
Yeah. Can I ask one more question? A short one. So what kind of doctor do you recommend people to see for the best chance of getting a proper diagnosis?
Yeah, that's so great. Such a great question. I would hope they would go to a psychiatrist. And I don't mean to say, bring the book and say, look at page 32. But it doesn't have to be this book. What I mean by that is that, all right, so there is in the book, you'll find out that there is a very simple bipolar diagnostic spectrum test, bipolar spectrum diagnostic test. It's like 10 questions. And all it takes is the doctor that knows that that test exists or believes in bipolarity to administer the spectrum test, which takes 5 minutes. It could be a primary care doc that does that, or it could be your psychiatrist, but it has to be someone who understands the complexity of bipolar, understands what's at risk to give you the test. Otherwise, they think you're sick and they give you more antidepressants. So in the book and in the TED Talk, I say, so I finally get to my 5th psychiatrist, 25 years, right? And it took me a long time to get to a psychiatrist because of the stigma. I didn't want to go. That was for my mother. I mean, but when I finally did go, because I felt like the kids were at risk if I didn't, 5 psychiatrists later, right? The first 4 almost killed me. The 5th one knew about bipolar spectrum and bipolarity, studied it. And he had the 11-question diagnostic test. And he's like, okay, so did you have your first episode under age 25? Yep. And do you have a history of mood swings in your family? Well, yeah, my mother and my grandfather both suffered terribly. And did they ever put you on antidepressants? Yes. And when you were on them, did it make you worse? Okay, and with that, like 4 more questions, like, we know what you have. You're going to be fine. You're bipolar. So it was like the diagnostic was very simple if you knew the right questions to ask. And then in my case, it's very lucky because the bipolar meds work like a charm. No side effects. Saved my life.
Okay, hold on.
Sir.
Wait. I think you had a question, Shona.
It was kind of just a continuation of that, like your pathway of therapists and medication that you had to continue to try something different and what that was like.
Yeah.
Over that time.
It was brutal. I mean, I think really, sometimes I think about why does one brain survive that has this and another brain not survive that has this? and I think this is going to sound a little woo maybe, but I think they land in different kinds of personalities or different kinds of souls. I happen to have one that's persistent. So even like super sick and dying, somehow I wasn't giving up. And mostly it was when I had kids, and I was like, I will rather live in hell and purgatory for all eternity than leave them with a mother who committed suicide. Somehow I had that. Not that I'm going to judge someone who does commit suicide, because I know I understand it. But it kept me going, and I was lucky. I was lucky, and I had Joe, my husband, who was exquisitely supportive and exquisitely supportive friends. And we live in a place where there's a lot of psychiatrists and therapists who live Northeast. I've come to learn from doing research for the book and for the TED Talk that this country has huge swaths of mental health deserts where there's no one in and that's going to be tougher. But yeah. I mean, partly wrote the book because I'm hoping it will be helpful. We'll have to wait 25 years.
So Rob has a number of Zoom questions.
Okay, yes.
Teeing up.
So Adam A just wrote in, as a survivor of family suicide, we say died by instead of commit. And then
died by suicide or yeah, okay, thank you.
okay.
Is there died by, and is there also took their own life? Is that okay, Adam? We can ask him to write.
We can ask him. He has his hand up, but Julie was first. Julie Dean has a question, so I'm gonna
Julie Dean from Minnesota. Hey, Julie.
Hi there. Thank you so much for doing this. I find your book and your presentation to be so courageous and valuable. And I was very surprised to find out what a lack of personal memoirs there are from people with mental illness. And you explain that really well about the shame and the risk factors of doing that. And I'm wondering if I can imagine writing workshops being held for people with mental illness to help them create their memoirs and really using your book as an inspiration. And I'm wondering if NAMI has anything available like that, the National Association for Mental Illness. I think that's what, I'm not sure what the acronym.
It's the right acronym. Hey, Julie, I can't see you. I wish I could.
Hi.
So I think that's a brilliant idea. And I was pointing to Rebecca in the front seat here, front row here, because she's leading writing workshops soon. I think that's a brilliant idea. I mean, it is the stigma. I could have published this book in 2007. I started writing it in 2007. It was 15 years before I waited. My mother died, my father. But also the fear of coming out. And because it's exquisitely healing. It's healing to write it. It's healing to speak it. It's healing to share with you guys tonight. And it was healing to be hearing people, writing back with their own stories. It's a human experience, and we feel less alone. I don't know if NAMI has or not. That's a great question. We can look it up and talk about it later. Good idea.
Okay, let's see. Beth, so Sarah, thanks so much for being so brave to step out and to be a role model that you are for people who are looking for answers and don't know where to look. We love you both. Well, we love you, Beth and Amy. And then,
hey, that's Beth and Amy. Carlos. Beth Carlos.
Great.
And well, let me just say about Beth though. So Beth and Amy, they're professional colleagues of ours from the B Corp Women's Community with the Change. And they just started, I know officially what the company's called, but they have a podcast called All Teens Considered, ATC. And it's specifically for this teen audience of teens at mental health risk. Look up All Teens Considered. I think it's brilliant and so necessary right now. And we know, there was the pandemic-induced mental health tsunami is kicking the butts of teens right now. And, the Surgeon General last year came out with an unprecedented report about the crisis in our youth mental health. 1 out of 2 kids are experiencing anxiety, depression, et cetera. So I really recommend All Teens Considered, Beth and Amy's new podcast.
okay, Adam has his virtual hand up. So Adam.
Yes, thanks. And I'm assuming that's Rob. And thank you for hearing the language. It's very important to me. And sorry if I'm being corrective, but taking mental illness out of the closet as you're doing, I think needs to include. And the quick part about that, the word commit was used to, I believe, among other things, to shame the suicider and the family, and was supposedly the way of getting people not to do it, and it's the opposite. And so that's why, and you know, the crime is mental illness, and the word commit made suicide a crime. Sorry for that. Sorry, not sorry for that. My
no,
question
that's good. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. It's really important. I definitely want to de-shame that.
Yeah.
So died by suicide.
And this isn't exactly a question, although it kind of is. So my dad, bless his heart, when I was growing up, was on lithium for what at the time may have been diagnosed as manic depression. So my question is, you know, how do we kind of differentiate what is now bipolar as opposed to manic depression? And I can only speak for myself with my own need for serotonin stabilization. Very wary of pharmaceuticals on that, in the sense that my understanding is that they can be hit or miss, even if properly diagnosed. So those are kind of my questions.
Yeah, I really good questions. I'm not sure I got them all, but I think that, yeah, the pharmaceutical thing is so tricky because I do believe the meds I finally got saved my life. Like people say, you're gonna be on this forever. I'm like, oh yeah. Every night that I take my lithium and my Lamictal, I say my prayers of gratitude. You know, if the somebody occupied the factory, I would go and take them down because got to get those. So that's, you know, when they work, they're really can be lifesavers. On the other hand, the wrong medication practically killed me. So what do you do? How do you navigate that? You have to, you know, hopefully have real good psychopharmacologists, hopefully have good resources in that way. Be blessed, be lucky, have the right diagnosis. And I think medication can really help. And people who are of high integrity. It is true that, you know, some doctors are representing, find out if they have any, if they're representing any drug companies. You'll want that, obviously. So there was something else, though, Adam, I think said, the thing about
the evolution of manic depression to bipolar as we know it.
Well, to me, manic depression and bipolar 1 are synonymous. Okay, that's one end of the spectrum. That's easy to diagnose because you see the big highs, you see the big lows. Lithium, it works, okay? In my case, I'm just a little bit down the spectrum. I don't have the huge highs. I'm high energy, so is everybody else in my family, right? But I don't have that, I don't have the big highs. So it's harder to diagnose, yet I am still bipolar, so those bipolar medications still work. Does that make sense? It's hard to say. Sometimes I use this like a little graphic. Imagine that this is a horizontal line, right? And for bipolar 1 or manic depression, here's baseline of normal, way high, way low, way high, way low, like that, right? I say for me, the baseline is just a little higher. So it's still maybe some kind of a curve, but you don't see the big highs. But it's still bipolar, see? And that's where this bipolar diagnostic spectrum test, which is so easy if you know to ask for it. And my 2 doctors that I've gotten close with, who are both, you know, bipolar doctor researchers, globally honored. One of them, Dr. Jim Phelps, he's got several books, Dr. James Phelps, if you want to look, PHELPS. He kind of really articulated the spectrum in ways that a layperson could understand. I got his book way back when I first got my diagnosis. It was very helpful. Why Am I Still Depressed? By Dr. Jim Phelps. But what was I going to say about the spectrum with him? Something. Shoot, lost it. Do you remember what it was? Right?
No, I just.
Okay, it's going to have to come back to me. Screen for bipolarity, screen for bipolarity, screen for bipolarity. Okay, here's another statistic that's going to blow your mind out there. All right. What kind of doctor writes the most prescriptions for psychiatric medications? Is it a psychiatrist? Everyone in the audience says no. We talked at dinner. Who writes the most scripts for psychiatric medications for depression? 70% of all of the 71 million scripts written for depression last year. We can ask, why are there 71 million depressed people? That's another question. But 70% were written by primary care docs who have little to no psychiatric training. Ouch. So they're prescribing these very dangerous medications, which sometimes can be a lifesaver and other times no. And so what he says, what Phelps has been trying to do and all his colleagues, just get primary care docs to screen for bipolarity. Here's the test. Give people the test. Do no harm, says screen. Because if they don't have bipolar and you give them lithium, it won't hurt them, it just won't work. But if they do have bipolar and you give them an antidepressant, it can make them sicker. So screen. Why don't they screen, Mark? Why can't we screen for bipolarity?
That's kind of my question. I'm wondering, it seems like there's a lot of education in the professional field, in the medical field, that needs to take place.
Yeah, Mark says it seems like there's a lot of education in the medical field. I have a niece who's in primary care residency right now, and we were chatting about this. She's like, they get very little psychiatric training, but now we have the pandemic-induced mental health tsunami in this country, right? It's unprecedented. You know, it's a massive wave, and we've got our finger in the dike. And yes, we need to get more education into primary care docs, into nurse practitioners, nurses, coaches, teachers. That's why I want this thing to sell.
And even psychiatrists.
And even psychiatrists, exactly. Even psychiatrists, because 4 out of 5 didn't get it. So it's, you know, so who are the first line defenders? You know, some of you guys have teenagers, right? Who's the first line defenders? The coaches, the teachers, the therapists, the band director, who knows? Do they know to screen? You know, I mean, really, guys, I'm just about telling this thing, but really, I wanted somebody in Iowa who doesn't have a psychiatrist for 500 miles to look at that thing and go, they could be the coach, the teacher, or they could be the parent, say, oh, this looks familiar, let's get the test. And that you can get the diagnostic test for free. You can take it yourself. It's on my website.
Okay.
It's not my, I just, you know, link to Jim Phelps's test. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm not sure. Nikki, do you have your hand up? No, it's just up. Okay. Then there's a question from Sharon. Sharon, unmute. Sharon Cohen.
Oh, that's my cousin. Hi, Sharon.
She's not unmuting. Maybe she thought I forgot it. Well, let's move. There are 2 other hands while we're waiting for Sharon. And I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. Junita Brown? Juanita Brown.
Hi,
All right.
Juanita.
Sorry about that. It's my kids hate me when I try and pronounce things.
Juanita's in the book.
Okay, unmuted.
Juanita's in the book. Hi, Juanita. Can't see you, honey.
Sarah. Sarah, I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. One is, what about poor people? We're all upper middle class and know all about different specialists.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about all this HIPAA things when people don't talk to each other and teachers and people don't want to go over the line or say anything? I think right now it's a really tough thing to even handle where in our privileged position. And Sarah, how would anybody guess that somebody as beautiful, as bright, as athletic, who sings the way you do and so forth, it would be so easy to hide? You know, you did from us.
Yep. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for that commentary. I sang it at her wedding. No, I think that, first of all, I appreciate, and really why I am coming out with this thing is because this is the face of bipolar. You know, it could be anyone, right? Thing one. As far as HIPAA, I really don't know enough about it. If there were, you know, any doctors or nurses or somebody in the audience, I don't know enough about it. I get what I think I understand what you're.
And what do medications cost?
Well, it depends if you have insurance or not, right? I mean, yeah, there's a chapter in the book about insurance is a disaster, right? I mean, I was just talking with a young woman. She was on one of our calls and she's just been diagnosed with bipolar, professional businesswoman. And she said her insurance isn't covering it. I don't know. There's so much injustice. I mean, this is a lifetime of work, right, folks? We just have to keep raising awareness. You know, as far as people who aren't as privileged as me, as us, I do in the beginning have a disclaimer because I am a white woman with white skin privilege. I am a middle-class lady. I have a master's degree. I have a ton of privilege. And even with all that, it almost killed me, right? So how much more difficult is it going to be for someone without all those advantages? And yeah, I mean, we have to keep working to give people access to healthcare, give people
Sarah, when when was the spectrum and the name 2 identified? Is this fairly recent?
It's pretty recent. Yeah. I mean, I should know that for sure. I think it's around 06 or 05, or certainly in the last, not much more than 20 years, but it's only really slowly being understood and even adopted by psychiatrists. If you guys know the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is where psychiatrists and other psychiatric professionals, do their diagnosis from, that manual. There's DSM Roman number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It wasn't in 1, 2, 3, 4. It just got in 5. So, which means if you went to psychiatric school in 1960 or 80 and you decide to stop learning, you don't know. That's why I asked my doctor, why did it take 5 psychiatrists to get this right? Dr. Perlman, you're 75. He said, I said, how did you know? And they didn't. He said, I knew that my patients' lives were at risk. I couldn't risk stopping learning. So he stayed with it.
Now, Juanita Brown.
Okay, there's one.
Hello, Sarah. How
Hi,
are you? As I was reading the book and looking at our own family history, knowing that my mother was hypomanic with no depressions, my aunt was a manic depressive. My brother was a unipolar depressive who died by suicide. And I know myself, the intensity of the experience that you described, and we've been in conversation about this for many, many years, maybe 30. Could it be 30 now? I'm really thinking, I'm thinking myself of what happens around the life cycle. So for me at age 77, I know myself that I could go for many years as a hypomanic before I would have a depression, which would also be devastating. But the nature of it shifted recently, at age 76, to something much more serious, actually, because I managed it for all of these years in a particular way that suddenly began to manifest what you and I would think of as the bipolar spectrum. In the extreme down phase, like I had never experienced at that level. And so I have a question actually about this whole issue of what if you are on the bipolar spectrum as you go through the cycle of life, and when you what do I or we need to be aware of as we enter a more vulnerable stage biochemically, even more vulnerable biochemically, because I never was on lithium or any of these others. I was only on an antidepressant medication that sustained me for many, many years. And so suddenly I'm deep into the bipolar spectrum, let's say, at this stage of life. And so I don't know quite how that progression works, or if there's been research on that and how to learn about it. Fortunately, I can say to the group,
I think that's your next PhD, Juanita.
Thank you, darling.
Next doctoral study. No, I don't mean, it's so complex. And, I write in the book, the brain is as vast as the universe and equally uncharted. I think our understanding of the brain is a kindergarten level, and when we look back on the 21st century, we'll see how rudimentary it was. And we got a ton of work to do. And I do think probably the stigma has kept more research from being done, because people are like, oh, those are just crazy people over there. We don't need to study the brain. The hope is now, like, I think your questions are really important and really difficult to answer. Who knows? I think for me, I pray that I get to 70 and this still works for me. You know, we don't know. And there's a risk in me coming out with a book. You know, it's kind of like, well, let's just hope. But I do think that, Juanita, you and I have talked about, and they're in the book, thanks to Julie Dean, practices for a healthy brain. I think there's a lot we can do once we recognize that we have sensitive nervous systems, once we recognize that we have our unique and beautiful and sensitive brains, that we do a lot to protect ourselves. I'll give you a little simple example today. I'm coming down here with Amy. I know I'm going to be driving 3 hours and then I'm going to be on at night. I'm going to be driving through traffic. And in the old days, I would have just powered through. And instead I wrote Amy and I said, is there a place I can take a nap before I go on? It seems like a little thing, but I knew to ask, you know, and I wouldn't have known to ask before. Like I have a radical respect for my unique bipolar brain. So I think there's preventive stuff we can do, hopefully the right diagnosis, like maybe now, Anita, you have the right diagnosis, who knows? And, you know, increasing research. And then the last thing I'll say that I found very hopeful is just on April 6th, there was an article that they've actually found, they being researchers at Harvard, MIT, and Mass General, my home state, have actually found a bipolar gene marker. The first one they've ever identified the marker. Like we kind of knew it was there. We thought it was genetic because mom and grandma and everybody else and doctors have said it was genetic, but they actually found the marker. So the fact that they found the marker is hopeful for treatments, future treatments, et cetera. But we got a long way to go, Anita. You're in the book, girl. You know that.
I know.
For your children?
You know, Amy asked if I'm concerned for my children, and the answer is yes. But I also have a lot of faith that now we know what I have. We didn't know what I had before. If they have this gene, there are therapies. I do think there is also some function of how you were raised, because there is some indication that traumatic households put someone at more risk. My kids did not grow up in a trauma-based household. They grew up in a very calm household. We did that on purpose. I grew up in a trauma-based household with a lot of Sturm und Drang. So I think that, you know, the kind of assault to one's nervous system that I had as a little kid, they didn't have. I have hope. And then there's also the gene, right? I mean, in my family of origin, I'm one of 4 that got it. In my mom's generation, she was one of 3. In my grandfather's generation, I think he might have been one of 7. So not everybody's doomed to get it, right? And hopefully maybe the chain ends with me, and that's my prayer, you know, that my kids don't get the chain. Wow. But
you've also removed the stigma from your family. So if they do show symptoms, they wouldn't hesitate probably.
Right, thank you. Yeah, that's great. Jackie said that I've also removed the stigma for the family, so they're going to know not to hesitate. I don't know what time it is. I'm having a good time.
It's 7:45.
Oh, we were still good. Yeah. I just wanted to say that one of the most moving stories, we're talking about kids their age in their early 20s. My other twin, Sam, he reads the book just before he leaves for college. He's sitting there reading it, you know. He says to me, Mom, this is the first book I've read since middle school, which kind of worried me based on where he went to high school, that he hadn't read a whole book, but he really couldn't put it down. Okay, it's his mother's story. But then about a month later, I got a call from him and he said, Mom, could you overnight me the book? And he's now a freshman in college during COVID. I think my new best friend, Jamie, might have what you had. Mm-hmm. And a big reason I wrote this was so that it wouldn't take the Jamies of the world 25 years to figure out what they had with all the pain and suffering and risk in the interim. So long story short, Jamie reads the book. Jamie gets a diagnosis. Jamie's doing really well right now, and he had been really struggling. Mm-hmm. And he's one of my prouder testimonials on the back here. Mm-hmm. Jamie writes, I vividly remember reading Brainstorm for the first time, reaching page 3 and breaking into tears. This is a frat boy, by the way. Here was someone describing exactly how I felt, as if they were inside my brain at a time when I didn't understand what I was feeling. This book changed, even saved my life, for which I am forever grateful. Wow. Thank you, Jamie. So, yeah. We lost our moderator.
I know. Well, I think that, you know, what's going through my head right now, I have a young cousin who died by suicide, and I think remained to this day undiagnosed. We don't exactly know what was happening. And I will never know, but I wonder if it was something, if this could have been the cause and it could have been prevented. It was heartbreaking. But I do hope that you're going to save a lot of lives. I think you will. I think you're starting already, maybe with people here in Zoom. Shall I go take a peek and see if there's anybody else?
Any other questions in the audience?
We lost our monitor.
Our monitor went to the front door there.
There is, okay, I see.
Okay, meantime, remember Hudson Valley Books for Humanity.
Nikki Silver.
Oh, hi, Nikki.
Hi, Sarah. How you doing?
I haven't seen you in a long time. I can't see you, but I hear you.
Hey. Yeah, thank you for writing this. You know, I'm a big supporter of you. And when I was in my 50s, I got diagnosed with some brain stuff, and I went through this whole shame thing. And I haven't been as brave as you. And I never thought that my diagnosis was actually accurate. And I didn't actually at the time care about, none of the drugs they gave me actually worked. And I didn't actually care about the diagnosis in a sense. I just knew that there was something wrong with my, not wrong, but there was some way that was different in the way that I viewed life and the way that people around me dealt with things that seemed normal to me. Somehow I got feedback that was really not appropriate. And it was sort of a surprise to me because it felt perfectly sane to me. And I'm not even sure what the question is. You know, I wasn't, when I was all supportive of you, I was supportive of you for you. But then when I read your book, it was like, I felt this sense of like, I don't know, this is like, wow, why didn't I do that? What's, I don't know that I have my diagnosis. And there's some part of me that has been working really, I feel like crying right now, working really hard in my life to seem like I would be on par with people, that some things that seem matter of fact have been incredibly hard for me. And because I show up, people don't see the backstory. I haven't had the same kind of thing of, you know, not being able to get the peanut butter and, you know, going to the store. That's not the way it manifests for me. Which makes, you know, I read your book just because I wanted to support you, but then it made me wonder, is this what, I'm almost hopeful to get a good diagnosis, but I don't know that bipolar is my thing. But I have had a lot of limitations and my life has been a real struggle. And I felt this sense of, I don't know if envy is the word, but this sense of like some way I haven't been out with whatever's going on for me. And I know that it will free me, but I don't quite know what steps to take for myself. Because I mean, what I've ended up doing is consciousness and trying, like that story you told, like I had a story one day that I was going to, like about taking a rest, you know, that when you came down, that you knew enough to ask to take a rest, that you would have plowed through it. And I feel like I've been working on my tenacity. And then one day I realized I can stop. I don't have to plow through things because the way that I have survived has been with a lot of tenacity. And then at the back end has been exhaustion. Right. And so I'm not sure what even if I'm asking anything, but I'm saying something for myself. And don't know what my next, I mean, I've spent my life going to practitioners, mostly holistic practitioners, because drugs frankly didn't work for me in terms of what they were working with me for. So I'm not sure what my next step would be, if there is something, or if I just continue to kind of plow through the best of my ability. I didn't get 800s on my college boards, by the way. Maybe it's collectively I did.
Next step is let's talk. You and I should talk after.
Okay, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, because I think, I mean, the sort of big picture, we're trying to lift the stigma, lift the shame, right? Shame lifter off of everybody's diverse brain, right? Everybody has if you think about it, we probably each have our own unique and powerful brain. And it's like everything else in society, it's supposed to be this way, but we have all kinds of diversity. So I think just, you know, beginning to honor your unique and powerful brain for whatever it is. Joe, my husband, tells a story of one of his friends who's a brilliant facilitator of this personal transformation work we do called shadow work. And this guy is like amazing therapist, right? And he's also has some kind of a bipolarity. And he was complaining that like his brain is, different from everybody else's. And Joe said, yeah, you're the most brilliant facilitator I've ever seen. Maybe it's good that you have a different brain. So it's like, how do we begin to just accept and appreciate this new term that's been around for a while? I didn't know it's been, but I just discovered it, called neurodiverse.
Well, I know
That's
that.
kind of a nice thing, right? So you're neurodiverse, Nikki, like all of us. And then how do we just like honor that? Like we'd honor anybody else as diverse.
Well, by the grace of God, I worked 3 times as hard as my colleagues to get through chiropractic school. And I have a brilliance in that perspective that's different than the people around me, albeit at great emotional expense for me to be able to manifest that. It's like, anyway, it would be great if I could talk to you. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, let's talk.
Okay. When are you home?
Oh, after May 7th. I've got my TED Talk on May 7th. I got to focus till then.
Yeah, that'll be great. Thanks,
up and talk about what's next for you. So you have this TED Talk, and then what?
First, let's just take another moment of what do you call it? Where you have a little advertisement moment for Hudson Valley Books for Humanity. This fabulous place. If you're anywhere near New York, you come up the Hudson on a beautiful train ride along the river, and you show up at Amy and Rob's wonderful store. And then you go shopping at Jackie's afterwards. What's next?
Yeah.
So, it's interesting because like I was, many of you know me as a sustainability consultant professionally. And I was saying the mission of the book is to 3 things: save lives, end the stigma, maximize healing. And about 3 or 6 months ago, I found myself shifting from the mission of the book is to my mission is. My mission has become save lives and the stigma, maximize healing. So I'm all in now. And so I'm doing whatever I can. This talk, my first public talk since COVID. I have been praying for a TED Talk and I got one. They're not easy to get. You got to apply. So that's coming up May 7th. I'm working really hard on the script. You got to memorize it. For those of you in my mail list, I'll be able to be a live stream link and that night. And then it'll be on the TED website, but not for a couple months. I'm doing conferences with doctors. I've got one. This is kind of cool for shame lifters, you guys. Instead of being a mental illness freak, I'm now an expert by experience. So these bipolar docs who are like world class, they give all the research and all the double-blind studies and all the charts. And then they turn to me and they go, and so what's it like, Sarah? So basically I'm hitting the road and doing conferences with these doctors. I'm giving a talk at my local library.
And will you not be working during this time?
This is my work.
This is your work now. Great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I got to get it out there.
This is it. The world needs you.
Yeah, I got to get it out there. So that's what I'm doing.
All right.
Yep. So you can find the book on Amazon. You can also audiobook if you prefer. And you can also ask your librarian. As a citizen of your town, you're allowed to ask your librarian for any book. So you can ask your librarian. I just found out there's one in Iowa. I'm happy about that. And yeah, please spread the word.
Cool. All right.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Twitter thing.
Thanks, everybody.
The Zoom. It's Zoom.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming. Love you.
Did you end the recording?
I'm going to end it now.
Of course.
Somewhere.
Okay.